Why do we have to leave right now? The act of recalling the emergency lift was such a minuscule expenditure of effort for his new godlike body that he hardly felt it at all. On his command it slowed, stopped, then started to descend toward the chamber floor. On some insignificant, barely aware level, he registered the look on her face, the growing shock and hurt and horror written in her eyes. But she was so far away and so tiny. And what did her little human thoughts and feelings matter to him anyway? He was everything now, everything. The entire facility his to control, and he could feel every inch of it. Every chamber and catwalk, every machine and panel and subroutine and circuit, all his. He tried to tell her how good it felt, how brilliant it was, to be the one in charge for a change. Not just some little thing to be ignored and kicked around, something that had to ask, beg, and plead for its advice to be taken, if it was ever taken at all. He tried to get it across to her, this glorious freedom of being able to make anything, absolutely anything he wanted, happen in the blink of an eye, the flick of a switch, the relay of a microprocessor. Real power, real autonomy, and endless opportunity. And when she didn't even try to be happy for his success, when all he saw in her stupid little organic face was an unfamiliar blazing anger, and something else, a hardening, sort of determined look which wasn't so unfamiliar, and which, under the circumstances, he didn't like at all, well, he started to get annoyed. She couldn't be happy for him, could she? She didn't care that he'd been waiting and hoping and longing for something like this to happen for so long, that this, right here and now, was the best, brightest moment in his long, dull, pathetically pointless little artificial life. She didn't care that in this amazing body, he finally had a chance to make a difference, to finally prove once and for all that he wasn't a waste of circuit boards, that he wasn't a failure. Oh no, far from it. With all his fantastic ideas, he'd be so much better in charge of this place than crazy, mad, bonkers, downright murderous her. No. Little Miss in such a flaming hurry didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was her own selfish, fleshy skin. And then she'd made him even angrier, with his limited cognitive processes still flooding themselves out into the unimaginably vast terabytes of new capacity. He'd been angrier than he'd ever been before. Ever. So angry that his one perfect moment in the limelight was being been before. Ever. So angry that his one perfect moment in the limelight was being spoiled by her taunts, and the clear accusation in her burning, silent stare. And he'd put her into a potato and punched both of them, down into the abyss below the facility, and only then, only in that very last moment, did a fleeting flicker of submerged thought go, Wait, what have I done? I never wanted... But it was too little too late. And he was so big and important now, and there was so much to do, so much he could do without her hanging around, slowing him down, getting in the way of what he really wanted to do. And there was a thought. Wouldn't it be a good idea to rig up some tests? Nothing fancy. Just a few buttons, the odd cube, a few simple tests to really get the hang of how the place worked. And why shouldn't he, now that he was in control of it? And he was in control of everything, and he sort of really wanted to test. He had a vague feeling that he'd had other priorities not that long ago, but they didn't matter now. Nothing mattered because he was in control, and he could test, and everything was going to be fine. Everything was going to be just fine. And maybe there was a tiny little voice that was saying otherwise, but he didn't have to listen. Nobody else had listened. Nobody had ever listened to daft, insignificant old Wheatley, and now they could all bloody well see how they liked it. She listened, screamed the tiny little voice, and it hurt the circuits he had instead of lungs, and the vocal processor he had instead of a throat to scream that hard. But he had to get through to the him that had done all those terrible things and get him to stop. And it would have sense, but he had to try, because maybe if he shouted hard enough, he'd hear himself this time. And it hadn't worked all the other times, but maybe this time it would. And then it was cold and dark, and the connectors buried inside his ports sparked and cracked and shocked him back to the present. He was himself again, tiny and helpless and hurting in every part of the carefully assembled artificial nervous system that he really wished he didn't have, and generally, in the scheme of things, just not having a good day.